Natalia and welcome back to my channel. Today we have the iconic Mirrorball dress pattern. I'm so excited to put this one out for you guys. I think it's possibly the easiest one out of all the Taylor Swift ones that I've done. So hopefully if you're a beginner, this one will be quite easy for you. The main difficulty with this one, I would say, is the fabric is a little wonky to work with. I assume if you're making this piece, you're gonna be using the same fabric that I used. I found it in downtown LA's fashion district, but you can also find it on Etsy. I've found it plenty on all those websites, so it's not necessarily hard to find. But I will say the little silver squares do fall off very, very easily. So what I've found through working with it is that if you iron it, like on the back side, obviously not on the side with the silver squares, but on the other side on a like low heat, it'll help kind of reactivate the glue that holds those silver squares on the fabric, and it'll stay a little bit better. But do be warned, either way, they do kind of fall off. So it's not gonna look super well, but I haven't found a fabric that mimics it the same way that doesn't do that. So I don't know, that's what I found. So if you are working with that same fabric, just know that that's the trouble that I went through. The second thing I want to say before we get into it is this fabric doesn't fray, so you don't need to finish your edges if you don't want to. You don't really have to hem it, which I also think is why it's kind of a fun one for beginners, because you don't have to do all the finishes. Like, it's not gonna fray. You can if you want to make it look nicer, but not necessary. And the last thing I want to say is the shoulder pads, I suppose, are optional if you don't want to have the shoulder pads, but the pattern is made so that you would have the space for the shoulder pads. So you would have to adjust the shoulders and like lower them down, I think probably like a ½ inch if you wanted to do it without the shoulder pads. But if you do it with the shoulder pads, I do recommend trimming the shoulder pads a bit. At least I found for myself that the shoulder pads kind of came out a little bit too much for me, and I preferred them to be like right where the shoulder ends. So I did trim the shoulder pads on like the thinner side a little bit, and then I overlocked that edge. You don't have to get that fancy if you're just making it for yourself and you don't care for clean finishes, but that's what I did with the shoulder pads, which I don't remember if I mentioned in this video or not, so I wanted to put that out there. Those are my 3 little disclaimers, and that's it. So let's get into it. Ready? All right, so you're gonna need your metallic fabric, your shoulder pads, and a zipper, and you're ready to go. Go ahead and cut out your pattern. With this fabric, I do want to note that these little silver squares will fall off every 2 seconds if you don't iron down this fabric. I learned this the hard way after making my own. A friend of mine gave me this tip, and she said that if you iron down, obviously on the wrong side, it kind of activates the glue again in those silver squares and helps them stay down better, because otherwise they will literally be falling off everywhere. So fair warning on that, but cut out all of your pieces, iron them down, and get ready to sew. We're gonna start nice and simple by just putting our backs to our front. So I will be sewing at the shoulder seams and at the side seams at a ½ inch seam allowance. This fabric doesn't fray at all, so you're not gonna really need to like finish off the edges or anything, which is quite nice. So just go ahead and sew those up ½ inch seam allowance all the way through. Now we're going to do the same thing with the sleeves, just fold them together and ½ inch seam allowance all the way through for both of them, just to get those prepped. Now we're going to turn the sleeves inside out, and we're going to place them on the armhole so we can actually get those sewn into place. So I line up the seams first, and then the center of the sleeve to the top shoulder seam as well, and then kind of just move everything else accordingly so that it fits. Clip that in place, and then go ahead and sew it down. Now we're going to take the neck piece and fold it in half and find the middle of it and line it up with the middle of the neckline, and then just adjust accordingly, moving everything around and lining it up all around the neckline. And then we're going to be sewing that also ½ inch all the way around. So now we're going to be understitching this. I'm going to move all of the seam allowance down, and then I'm going to be stitching right next to that seam just to make sure it stays up nicely. Now it's time to put in our invisible zipper. You can also use any other kind of zipper. I just am an invisible zipper girly. I love the look of them. It looks the cleanest. So you can do whatever. Taylor actually didn't have an invisible one on hers, so you could, do it like her, but I like an invisible one. So anyway, do one side and then make sure that it matches up with the other side perfectly in terms of like that little seam at the neckline, and then get that other side sewn down, and then we'll be ready to finish this off. In all honesty, you don't have to hem this fabric because again, it doesn't fray, and it's pretty easy to like create a hem since you have all these squares anyway. You kind of just like cut a straight line and make sure it's like along one of the square lines, and then you're good to go. But just to make it look extra clean, I did just go ahead and hem it. Nothing crazy. Again, since it doesn't have to be finished, it's not like I did a double fold or anything. I just like folded it once, did a nice little hem, and called it a day. Now the best part of all this is adding the shoulder pads in. Make sure you are putting them in the right way. So the thicker side is going to go towards like the shoulder and the thinner side is towards the neck, because I've messed this up so many times before. I just like to line it up with the shoulder seam and then tack it down at the armhole seam and then towards the neckline seam, and just tack down those two places and everything kind of just falls into place. Otherwise, you don't have to tack it down on all four corners or anything. Or at least I haven't found that I needed that. And lastly, I'm going to clean up this zipper. I always have that little tail end of the zipper sticking up, so I like to hand stitch that down so that it really stays clean and in place, and we don't have any weird, zipper edges coming up. And due to the shoulder pads, this looks really weird when it's laying flat, but I promise you it looks better on. I hope you guys enjoyed it. This is one of my favorite looks that Taylor has ever worn, and I'm so happy that it's such a simple one to recreate and that now we have this fabric readily available to us. So if you make this, tag me, send me DMs. I would love to see it. It's such a fun piece. And obviously the pattern is linked down below on my website if you guys want to download it. And that is it for today's video. I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!